If you have read the book Atomic Habits, then you must be aware of importance of keeping track of all the habits, which is a reward mechanism, and this is a key thing to build the habits. And since this is a Notion database video, so we will create a habit tracker using the Notion database. First, we need to create a database to keep track of the habits. So let's create the database. So we'll create a full page database. If you have never used or created a Notion database, then you can watch my video on how to create Notion database, and I'll put a link of that video in the description as well as in the I button. You can watch it from there. We will call it habit tracker. There are two ways we can create habit tracker using Notion database. The first option is for all the habits we can create columns or database properties, and for each day we can create a new row to keep track of those habits. And the other option to create the habit tracker database using Notion is something which looks more like a calendar, where for all the days of the week we create Notion property or column, and for all the habits we create the rows. Now for our case, we'll be creating the habit tracker in such a way that we will add the habits in the row and we will use the column for weekdays. So let us add the weekdays as a column of the habit tracker database, and we will use the checkbox as column type or property type, and we will rename this. So let's say we want the week to start with Monday, so we'll say Monday here. Then I will call this Tuesday, and similarly we will add the rest of the days. Okay, so we have now added all the 7 days of the week as column or property of the habit tracker database. And if you have seen my video on Notion database, I recommended there that there are 4 columns that we should always add into our database, and those 4 columns are created by, created time, last edited by, last edited time. So we have now added all the required columns, and one final thing that we will do is we'll rename this to, instead of name we will call it habit. And let me also do some adjustment of the columns here. Okay, so I'll just drag this a bit to say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and just keep it like this. This will give us some visual clue that these are the days of the week. Okay, so once the database is ready, it's time to add some habits. Let's add the first habit as wake up early. Then we can add reading as second habit. Okay, what else? Maybe jogging as third habit. Not sure if it is true for you, but after learning Notion database, the first thing that I created was the habit tracker. And if you are doing the same, then you can share your experience in the comment section below. Okay, so let me add some more habits. Okay, so this is how we can add all the habits into the habit tracker database. Now, just to give it a better look, we can hide these 4 columns that we just added. It will just be there in case we need it for anything later, but we'll just hide those for now. Okay, so our habit tracker now looks like this, and as you can see on the column we have all the weekdays, and on the left side rows these are the habits that we want to track. So for any specific day, let's say for Monday, we want to perform all these habits, and as and when we do that, we can just mark this like this. Just check the checkbox. Similarly, we can do it for the next day. And this is how we can keep track of all the habits on each day of the week. Now you must be thinking, once you track all these habits for the entire week, what will happen to the next week? Now there are two things that you can do. You can uncheck all of this at the beginning of the week and again start tracking this, but that's not a very good way to track the habits. So let me bring it back. And the other option, which is also the better option, is to create all these habits again at the beginning of next week and track accordingly. And in that case, what will happen is that the same habit will appear multiple times in the database. For example, the first one, if you create this habit again at the beginning of the next week, let's say we create this again, work on personal project. Let me correct this one. And you might have noticed that there are now 2 entries, and as and when you will be adding the habits each week, it will keep on growing. Now to address that issue, you can use a filter and you can use this created time, and you can then select this option related to today, and then you use this week. So what it will do, it will only show the rows or the habits which are created in that particular week. And I hope now you are also realizing why I insisted to add those 4 columns, and you can already see the benefit that it can bring into your database. Now let me quickly talk about what is the disadvantage of using habit names as the database columns and days as rows, which is the other alternate option of creating the habit tracker that we already discussed. I have already created the alternate option as another separate database. So as you can see, I have added all the habits as database property or column, and we can use the days as row to keep track of the habit. So I have just added 1 day here, but if you want, you can add more days like this. And like the other habit tracker we created, we have used the checkbox. So for example, if we want to track all these habits on specific day, let's say on Monday, so we can just click on this as and when we are completing the corresponding habit. Now what is the disadvantage here? So as you can see, the habits are the columns of the database, and every time you want to add a new habit, you actually have to create a new column. Now you may say that adding a new column is not a big deal, but the thing is that any change in columns by inserting, adding or deleting is basically a structural change of the database, and every time for a new habit, adding the new column is not a very convenient way. Now let's say you want to keep track of one more habit. Now in order to do that, you have to modify the database by creating a new column. And if you have good number of habits to track, then as you can see, if we put the habit name as column, then it takes some space on the screen, and if you want to add more, then it will grow horizontally, and then you have to go left and right to see all those habits, and that becomes really inconvenient, at least to me. I personally do not prefer to create my habit tracker in this way, but if you think that this is more convenient for you, you can definitely do that. But I find the other option more convenient and compact, as you can see here, because if I just want to add any new habit, it's just a new row that I need to add. So just say new habit to track. That's it. As you have seen, it is really easy to create a habit tracker using Notion database, and this is a very basic version of the habit tracker which I covered in this video. However, there are a lot more that we can do using Notion database, like we can create the habits automatically each week using Notion task automation, and we can also manage and display the habits in the order that we would like it to be. We can add a progress bar and see how we have been doing for each of those habits on a weekly basis. And lastly, we can also do some customization to make it look better, and I have covered all of those in this video. I hope you like this video. Thank you for watching.